Hey, you are listening to What the Sigma with Chad Stacks. Today on the show, a jury in Oakland just handed OpenAI a massive win, clearing the path to a $1 trillion IPO and rejecting Elon Musk's $134 billion lawsuit in under 2 hours. We're breaking down why Musk's legal gamble failed, what Greg Brockman's $30 billion stake reveals about OpenAI's inner workings, and the shocking reality that despite pulling in $20 billion in revenue, they are still hemorrhaging cash. Plus, XAI could beat them to the Nasdaq in just weeks. Stick around. 9 people walked into a jury room, deliberated for under 2 hours, and just unlocked a $1 trillion IPO. That is the actual story from Oakland, not the Musk-Altman soap opera the mainstream coverage cannot stop narrating. The real story is a near-simultaneous collision of 2 AI companies racing into the same public market window, and one of them just had the last legal obstacle cleared from its path. Let me give you the structure first. Elon Musk sued OpenAI, Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, and Microsoft for breach of charitable trust. He sought $134 billion in damages, the removal of Altman and Brockman, and a full unwinding of OpenAI's for-profit restructuring. A federal jury in Oakland rejected every count unanimously after a 3-week trial and less than 2 hours of deliberation. Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers adopted the advisory verdict immediately as her own ruling. Musk's counsel, Mark Toberoff, responded with one word: appeal. The basis for the loss was statute of limitations. The jury found Musk filed too late, with the cutoff dates landing on August 5, 2021, August 5, 2022, and November 14, 2021, depending on the count. OpenAI's argument was that Musk knew about the for-profit conversion plans as far back as 2017. Musk testified his concerns about the for-profit structure only emerged in 2023. The jury sided with OpenAI's earlier timeline. He filed in 2024. The math does not work in his favor. Musk's team is calling this a technical defeat, a procedural footnote that leaves the underlying stole a charity claim unrebutted on the merits. OpenAI's lead attorney, William Savitt, had a different characterization, and I think his framing is the more accurate one. Savitt said, directly, "It's not a technical decision, it's a substantive one. It says you brought your claims too late, and you did it because you were sitting on them to use them as a weapon of a competitor who can't compete in the marketplace. That is not a close call on framing." The jury deliberated for under 2 hours on a 12-day trial. They were not agonizing. Now here is the part nobody is connecting. OpenAI's IPO path just cleared. The company is currently valued at $852 billion according to reports, with a target of roughly $1 trillion at the public offering. Annualized revenue crossed $20 billion this year from subscriptions, licensing, and ads. The Guardian states explicitly that this verdict gives OpenAI a clear path to go public later this year. Meanwhile, according to one report, XAI, which SpaceX acquired in February, is targeting a Nasdaq debut as soon as June 12th. 2 competing AI companies, both tied to the same founding mythology, both chasing the same institutional capital, potentially hitting public markets within weeks of each other. Musk may lose the lawsuit and still beat OpenAI to the public offering. Sit with that for a second. The post-trial narrative war is already underway, and it matters for what comes next. Musk's stole a charity claim was never adjudicated on the merits because the statute of limitations killed it before it got there. That is genuinely useful for the appeal and for the ongoing public pressure campaign. You can keep saying the substantive question was never answered, because technically it was not. Whether that framing survives scrutiny depends heavily on one detail that no source has adequately addressed: the actual governance authority of OpenAI's nonprofit foundation post-restructuring. Wired notes it is likely more financially endowed than any other charity in the world, but critics view it as an extension of the company rather than an independent check. Nobody has quantified the foundation's endowment or detailed its oversight mechanics. That is the central question in any appeal, and the coverage is treating it as a footnote. There is also a number from this trial that nobody seems to want to talk about. Greg Brockman disclosed during testimony that his OpenAI stake is worth approximately $30 billion. That figure did not exist publicly before this trial. It is buried in one Wire report. The cap table implications going into an IPO, the dilution mechanics, how that compares to Altman's equity position. Altman has historically claimed minimal direct equity. None of that is being examined. A $30 billion stake disclosure surfaced in a courtroom in Oakland, and the coverage moved on. The damages math is also worth a moment. Musk's expert, Dr. C. Paul Wazin, put wrongful gains at somewhere between $78.8 billion and $135 billion. The lawsuit anchored at the high end of that range, at $134 billion. Judge Gonzalez-Rogers described Wazin's analysis as, and I am quoting her directly here, devoid of connection to the underlying facts. That is a federal judge using language that does not leave much interpretive room. Musk testified for 3 days and then did not return to the courtroom. He flew to China on Air Force One during the trial. His own attorney had to note for the record that his client had chosen to be in a different jurisdiction than the one where he filed the lawsuit. There is one more detail worth flagging before we get to what this actually means. Wired reports that several members of the jury expressed unfavorable views of Musk before they were seated. They were seated anyway, they still ruled on narrow legal grounds. If the appeal strategy leans on jury bias, that factual record is going to be a problem. The jury did not rule on whether Musk was right about the charity. They ruled on whether he waited too long to say so. Here is what this story actually means for anyone watching capital formation in AI right now. OpenAI at $1 trillion IPO valuation is not a company generating profits. Reports confirm it is nowhere near turning a profit despite $20 billion in annualized revenue. The burn rate going into the public offering is an open question that no source has answered. A $1 trillion loss-making company and a newly merged XAI SpaceX entity are both pointing at the same institutional investor base within the same market window. That is not a personal feud. That is a capital allocation event with real second-order consequences for every fund that has to decide which AI infrastructure bet to anchor their next decade on. The litigation is over in the first instance. The narrative weapon is not. Musk retains the ability to keep saying the fundamental question, whether OpenAI betrayed its charitable mission, was never answered in court. That is true in the narrowest procedural sense. But a jury that deliberated for under 2 hours after 12 days of trial was not wrestling with ambiguity. They made a fast, clean, unanimous call, and the judge adopted it on the spot. The IPO clock is running. The appeal will take months, and somewhere in the gap between those two timelines, the most consequential AI capital raise in history is going to happen, possibly while the man who tried to stop it is still filing briefs. Remember, nothing said in this podcast is financial advice. This has been another fire episode at What the Sigma. Smash that follow button and tap 5 stars to spread the butter. Fortune favors the bold, baby!
Grab news. Thomas.